What is happening, everyone? The football therapist here, bringing you some early ADP watch. We're going to be breaking down some of these players in the first round and where their value lies with the current ADP and comparing them over the next few months to see where the change in the ADP occurs. So let's hit that intro. So guys, the data that I'm going to be talking about today is from Fantasy Calculator. It's a great site that allows you to not only mock draft, but also see how their data changes over the course of the offseason. A ton of people utilize it, and then the system kind of averages out where each player's draft position is going and charts it across the time period of the offseason. If we look at some of this early ADP data, we see kind of a standard start, in my opinion, for the top of the draft. I think a lot of people are going to take Christian McCaffrey at number 1. A lot of people are going to be looking at Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Derrick Henry in that 2 to 4 range. You can really interchange them, but it's going to be based on preference. I mean, a lot of these guys to me are relatively safe RB1s. Some of them may be a little bit ranked lower on my list, but currently these are the guys that I'm looking at in the top 4 picks as safe volume backs who do really well, not only in standard but PPR leagues. I think Saquon Barkley at number 5 is going to be a really risky pick this year. I talked about Saquon Barkley in one of my videos. If you haven't done so already, go check that one out. But to me, there's a lot of risk coming off that ACL injury. And then also the Giants offense is a little bit risky still. I mean, they're not an elite offensive line. They don't have many weapons to open up the pass game. They have good wide receivers, but no elite guys where the defense really has to focus on the receivers. They normally just stack the box and try to stop Saquon Barkley. I think Barkley, to me, is going to really fluctuate this offseason where his ADP is. I think we could see it as high as 1.5. I think we could see it as low as 1.10. It really is going to depend on if you're willing to take that risk on a guy who does have a ton of upside. He probably has an upside of the 1.01, but he has the risk of potentially falling out of the first round in terms of his value across the season. I think Davante Adams at 1.6 is very safe. You know he's going to get targets. You know he's going to get touchdowns in that Green Bay offense. Of course, that could change if they bring in another top wide receiver. Maybe he dips a little bit. But right now, I'd feel really confident if I was drafting Davante Adams in the off season. Travis Kelce at 1.7, it looks like, or 1.8. I think that Kelce is going to be a guy that could be drafted all the way up to potentially 1.05 depending on your league settings, or potentially in the mid-second. It really depends on how much you value him at that tight end position, because he's basically another wide receiver or running back on your team. He was really consistent this past season. He really dominated at the tight end position, and he really showed that he could be an elite option for fantasy teams, even if you're drafting him early. It just depends on how early you want to draft him. I'd look to really get him at that turn. I think putting him at the 1.11, 1.12 is a lot safer, but I can understand why people are really taking him this early. Nick Chubb, to me, is another one of those running backs that has huge upside, but he has a lot of risk again. He got hurt last year. He has Kareem Hunt on the team. Can he really bring back that value of a top 5 running back if you're going to be drafting him that high? I think right now at 1.09, I would definitely look to take him, but I think that there would be some other options a little later on these ADPs that I would really like at the running back position. Tyreek Hill, again, just like Adams, he has a really good situation. You know he's going to score. You know he's going to get targets. So at 1.09, I cannot hate that. Zeke, I think he's being a little bit undervalued this year. I talked about it on a couple of my posts on my Instagram page, but I think Zeke is going to be a guy who is going to be overlooked a little bit this offseason. Potentially people are going to be really down on him from his last season, You got to remember, he really struggled when Dak was not on the field. When Dak was on the field, he was a top 3 running back. He was doing big things and he was consistent week in and week out. But it's the fact that Dak got hurt, the offensive line had a little bit of injuries, and it really took a toll on Zeke's performance. I think at 1.10, I think he's definitely worth the risks if you could pair him with a safe wide receiver option. Hopkins, I think that 1.11 is a little bit high for him. I think that there's a couple wide receivers behind him on this ADP list that I would prefer over him. He does have top 3 to 5 potential. We know that he's an elite playmaker. He gets the targets, but can he consistently get the targets and have good games in this offense? We saw in the back half of the last year, he kind of struggled here and there. He was kind of locked down by guys like Jalen Ramsey, some of the bigger name cornerbacks where he didn't have as big of a game, but I can understand why people would want to take him because of that volume aspect. I just would prefer other wide receivers behind him. And then Aaron Jones, to me, he is one of the guys that I was down on last year and I was wrong about. He has the talent to really sustain RB1 numbers, but with the off-season question marks of where he's going to land, I can't really take him at 1.12 right here. I'd be hoping to get him in the mid-second to late second, potentially if he lands in a good situation. But right now, 1.12 is just way. So we're going to quickly look at some of the second round ADP data. Some of the guys that I really like where their value at right now. Jonathan Taylor is the first one that comes to mind. I have him as a top 3 to 5 overall player going into 2021. I think that he's going to have a big year, break out completely, dominate at the running back position, and to get him in the early second is just very exciting right now. I think Calvin Ridley is being a little bit undervalued. To me, he's a top 3 wide receiver going into 2021. I would take him over Michael Thomas. I would take him over DK Metcalf. I would take him over DeAndre Hopkins. The only guys who I probably wouldn't take him over are Adams, Hill, and then potentially Diggs. I probably would go one or the other depending on the draft. Guys who I think are a little bit overvalued here. George Kittle, top 18 overall pick. I cannot invest in him at that price range. I think that the injury concerns are very alarming. I think that Darren Waller would be a much better option in the 3rd round, so I just would not target Kittle at that ADP. And then lastly, I think Austin Eckler at the turn there. He's not a guy that I'm going to be owning a lot of shares of in 2021. I think he definitely has that top 10 running back potential, but looking at some of the guys behind him, I like Jonathan Taylor much better, so I would rather fade Austin Eckler for Jonathan Taylor there. And some of these other players behind him, the wide receivers, I would take over him too. Let me know what you guys think about the early ADP. Comment below who you'll be targeting. We'll be doing another ADP Watch